On the afternoon of September 5, 1949, the sky above Cleveland Municipal Airport shimmered with the sound of a Merlin engine being driven far harder than any wartime manual had ever intended, and more than 72,000 spectators packed into the grounds of the municipal airfield watched a radically modified P-51 Mustang named Begin carve its way around the pylons at over 400 miles per hour, a vision of post-war optimism wrapped in polished aluminum and daring engineering. At the controls sat Bill Odom, the man the newspapers still described as one of America's greatest living aviators, yet who, in an irony few in the crowd understood, had never flown a pylon race before that very weekend, arriving instead with a resume built on long-distance endurance feats, records for transcontinental and global flights, including a celebrated round-the-world journey completed in just 73 hours and 5 minutes, that made him a hero of the Bendix style of racing where patience and navigation mattered more than knife-edge turning. The Mustang itself looked reborn, less a warplane than a bespoke racing machine, because Jackie Cochran, the legendary aviatrix who held more speed and altitude records than any woman alive and who had a keen eye for talent, had purchased Begin specifically for Odom to race, investing in an aircraft whose modifications were among the most imaginative ever attempted on the type, with its radiator moved from the familiar belly scoop out to the wing tips to reduce drag, the lower fuselage fared over to a glassy smooth contour, every unnecessary ounce stripped away so that the airplane appeared to glide rather than fight the air. And veterans wandering the crowd that day remarked how the machine no longer carried guns or armor, but carried instead the hopes of a nation eager to see whether the fighter that had once swept the Luftwaffe from the skies could now dominate a civilian course. The Thompson Trophy race was supposed to be the climax of Cleveland air racing's golden age, an era that had begun before the Depression and survived even the Second World War, and Bill Odom, flying with Cochran's blessing, led the field confidently through the first lap, the Merlin howling as pylons flashed beneath the wing, and commentators on loudspeakers explained his background, assuring listeners that a pilot of such stature would surely adapt, while below, in nearby Berea, Ohio, families went about ordinary Labor Day routines, unaware that their neighborhood had become the backdrop for a national spectacle. On the second lap, however, witnesses noticed Odom cut inside pylon number 3, perhaps misjudging the line, perhaps feeling the pressure of aircraft stacked tightly around him, and he tried to correct toward pylon 4 with a movement that looked abrupt even from the stands, and the Mustang rolled inverted, flying upside down for a terrible suspended moment that seemed to stretch across the entire field, and then it plunged into a house on West Street, exploding into flame and shock as aluminum met brick and wood, killing Odom instantly and also Jean Lear and her 13-month-old son Craig, a family who had moved into that home only 4 days earlier and whose new beginning ended beneath the weight of an airplane called Begin, and the crowd of 72,000 watched in horror as the house burned, smoke rising where only minutes earlier television cameras had focused on aerial grace, and emergency crews raced through streets choked with spectators. Cook Cleland, flying a Goodyear F-2G Super Corsair, eventually won the race after Odom's crash, but victory fell hollow, and when reporters asked him about the tragedy, Cleland was blunt, saying Odom should never have been in the Thompson Trophy race at all because he was a Bendix pilot, a cross-country record man, and pylon racing demanded a different temperament, quicker reflexes, and a tolerance for sustained high G turns that even many combat veterans found exhausting, and his criticism echoed what other racers whispered, that fame did not equal suitability. The Civil Aeronautics Administration launched investigations almost immediately, and sponsors who had already been nervous after several fatal accidents in previous years began reconsidering whether air racing over a municipal airport so close to residential neighborhoods was worth the risk, and newspaper editorials declared that the era of surplus war fighters tearing around pylons had become incompatible with public safety, and within months the CAA threatened to ban future races unless strict changes were imposed, and Cleveland, which had once drawn over 100,000 spectators to pre-war Thompson Trophy events, saw its racing program collapse, forcing the Mustang out of American competition for more than a decade and pushing the type into the shadows. Yet that crash did not kill the airplane itself, only its innocence, because the P. P-51 Mustang was already sliding toward a second life nobody could have predicted when the war ended in August 1945, and the United States military discovered it possessed far too many airplanes, with North American aviation having built over 15,000 Mustangs at a pace exceeding 100 per week during peak production in Englewood, California. And now thousands sat in storage depots across America, Europe, and the Pacific, costing more to maintain than to scrap. And crews wielding acetylene torches began cutting up perfectly good fighters, dropping 18-foot steel plates from cranes to smash airframes in half, a destruction witnessed by a teenager named Ed Maloney at Calero Field near Chino, California, who said it was almost sickening to see B-17s and B-24s snapped like toys, and who saved carloads of technical manuals from bonfires, vowing to preserve as many aircraft as possible, becoming the exception among Americans who saw surplus Mustangs. Sold for as little as $1,500, less than the price of a new car compared to their wartime cost of $51,000 each, some transferred abroad for a nominal price of $1 under the Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance signed in Rio de Janeiro in September 1947. With the Swiss Air Force buying 130 Mustangs from surplus stocks in southern Germany for about $4,000 apiece in December 1947 and flying them until 1958. The belief in the late 40s was that jet aircraft like the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, which could outrun any piston plane in level flight, represented the future, and propeller fighters like the Mustang seemed destined for scrapyards. But that illusion shattered when North Korea invaded South Korea on June 25, 1950, and American commanders discovered their fast jets could not stay over the battlefield long enough to support ground troops and required long paved runways that early Korean airfields lacked, while jet engines ingested debris and flamed out, rendering sleek new fighters useless at forward bases where ground forces needed them most, and the Mustang, capable of loitering for hours and operating from dirt strips while carrying 1,000 pounds of bombs, rockets, or napalm, was pulled out of mothballs, with 145 Mustangs loaded onto the aircraft carrier USS Boxer, which departed Alameda, California on July 14 and arrived at Yokosuka, Japan just 8 days and 7 hours. Later, the fastest trans-Pacific crossing by a carrier in history, and by late July F-51 Mustangs were back in combat after the designation change of June 1948 from pursuit to fighter. Young pilots like Lieutenant East Ellsworth flew close support and interdiction missions against tanks and trucks, learning that the Mustang's liquid-cooled Merlin engine was its Achilles heel because a single rifle bullet through the radiator meant overheating and seizure within minutes, leading engineer Ed Schmud to lament that flying it in ground support was almost suicidal and that the Air Force had catastrophically scrapped the more suitable P-47 Thunderbolts with air-cooled radial engines, and statistics showed 335 Mustangs lost in Korea with 264 pilots killed or missing, 172 to ground fire and only 10 to enemy jets, yet the Mustang performed the mission, melting rubber off tank wheels with hybrid thermite napalm and forcing North Korean troops to move only at night, after 1953 jets like the F-84 Thunderjet and F-86 Sabre replaced it in American service, with the last Air Force Mustang withdrawn on January 27, 1957 from the West Virginia Air National Guard, but elsewhere the aircraft flourished. It fought for Israel's survival in 1948, mislabeled in crates as farm combines to evade Truman's arms embargo through coordination by Al Schwimmer, becoming the best Israeli fighter able to reach Damascus and Cairo, shooting down RAF Mosquitoes and Egyptian fighters, later cutting Egyptian telephone wires over the Sinai in October 1956 during the Suez Crisis with suicidal low passes that contributed to rapid advances before being retired by Israel on January 15, 1961. In America, it returned as a symbol through the Reno races revived in 1964 by Showman Bill Stead in the Nevada desert, with modified Mustangs like Straga and Voodoo exceeding 450 miles per hour with engines producing over 3,000 horsepower. Meanwhile, national air forces kept them flying. The Philippines used over 100 Mustangs against communist hook insurgents and Moro rebels and formed the Blue Diamonds team in 1953, Indonesia acquired them from the Netherlands East Indies Air Force and flew them against CIA-backed Permesta rebels, with Captain Ignatius Dewanto shooting down AB-26 flown by CIA pilot Alan Pope in 1958, Guatemala, Haiti, Sweden, Taiwan, mainland China, and most remarkably the Dominican Republic. Operated them into the early 1970s and 1980s, shark-mouthed Dominican Mustangs strafing a Cuban intelligence ship in 1983 and hiding from retaliatory MiG-21 jets, finally retiring in 1984 after 40 years and receiving A-37 Dragonfly jets from the United States. The Mustang saw the last dogfight between piston aircraft in July 1969 during the football war between El Salvador and Honduras when Captain Fernando Soto in an F-4U-5 Corsair shot down one Mustang and two Corsairs, closing the combat. Career of the P-51 forever. Yet thanks to Maloney, the teenager who founded the Planes of Fame Museum in 1957 at Chino, and to restoration shops across America, Merlin engines learned again to turn, and by the 1980s a restored Mustang sold for over $100,000 and today commands between $2 and $4 million with over 160 airworthy examples worldwide. Appearing at air shows from Oshkosh to Wanaka and starring in films like Top Gun, Maverick flown by Tom Cruise himself. And one aircraft named Sierra Sioux 2 is considered the most original still flying after a 3-year restoration completed in 2014, proving that the fighter designed in 102 days in 1940 as a stopgap had outlived its purpose by 8 decades and become a symbol of an era that refuses to end, beautiful and adaptable even after Cleveland 1949 pushed it into the shadows.